Hey everybody, Syntax77 here, back with another edition of SinChats, and today I posed the question, what kind of backpacker are you? Mileage killer or camp chiller? Or perhaps something in between. In other words, when you go out for a backpacking trip, whether it's solo by yourself or with your friends, what's your emphasis? Are you out there to crush miles, do as many miles as you can, just tear the trail up, get to camp after dark, wake up early and keep going? Or do you go 1 or 2 miles into the woods, set up camp, hang out, either by yourself or with friends, just kick back, soak it all in, maybe have more time for views, stuff like that? Or maybe you like a little bit of both, depending on the situation, which is pretty much where I fall, I believe, although I do have my favorite, but we'll get into that. First, let's break down the aspects of both. If you asked an ultralight backpacker, and I use them as an example because that's probably the demographic that is most concerned with bumping out high amounts of miles, because that's usually their motivation for getting their weight down. So I'm going to use them as an example. You ask an ultralighter why it is that they do what they do, and they're going to say, well, I want to put myself out on the trail, expose myself. The more trail I expose myself to, basically, the more views and experience and everything I'm going to soak in. I'm going to do more miles. So I might see 3 vistas in one trip, while somebody in chill mode might see 1 or perhaps even none at all. Now, somebody's on the opposite end of the spectrum, the camp chiller, might respond to that, and I've seen it plenty of times, by simply saying, you're totally missing the point, Mr. Mileage Killer. You're missing the point. You're out there focused on just pounded miles, feet, looking at your feet the whole time, and you're not even soaking in all those views that you claim to be out there getting this advantage over me with. You get to camp after dark and you don't have a campfire. You don't hang out and talk with your buddies for a few hours, if not half a day. And dude, you're just missing out. That's not what backpacking is all about. And then, of course, the ultralighter will come back and say, you don't know what backpacking is all about. And it will devolve, like most things in life where somebody just has to feel like what they're doing is the best. That's a whole nother issue. You should probably put that aside and do what works for you. There's a lot of different reasons that people go backpacking. That's why I'm interested in your answers out there to this. But there's a lot of reasons. And sometimes you're not just one bucket or the other, such as myself. Now, when I first started backpacking, I really was, I would say more so back then, into the high mileage, especially compared to like what I do today. And I think the reason for that is, when I first went out and started backpacking, I was really, obviously enlightened and blown away by just being immersed in nature and seeing these amazing views, and feeling completely alone on my solo trips. And then with friends, of course, just feeling like, you kind of own the mountain and you're out there in nature. But that being said, my personality type, and this brings it back to the whole, everybody has their own reasons, and personality comes into it. Me personally, I like numbers. I like quantifiable things. I like goal-oriented kind of situations as well. So while I like to get all the views and everything, part of me really does like just to have this numerical value. So I definitely gravitated towards that a lot in the beginning. Planned long routes. How much could I squeeze into a day? Which reminds me of another thing. Some of us don't have a lot of time. If you're at work all week and you can get away for 2 days and you want to see a region that you drove really far to see, then you're probably gonna, or at least I did, want to do something like my Smoky Mountains video where I crammed 57 miles into 2.5 days. That literally was not just to be like, oh, look at all the miles I did. It was because I don't know when I'm going to be back to the Smokies again. And I haven't since. There's just so many places to go. And I drove like 10, 11 hours with traffic to get there. Now, that video, the Smoky Mountains 57-mile video, is actually a good point. I got comments on there that definitely, time and again, would tell me that what's up with you trying to cram all these miles in. Had somebody literally tell me, dude, you're missing the point, just like I mentioned earlier. That was said to me. Made me pause and think, beyond the fact that I don't know why I have to hike how somebody else hikes, but made me pause and think, am I missing the point? For me, I don't think so, based on the things I just told you a couple minutes ago. For somebody else, they might want to relax and see more things, then yeah, for them it's missing the point. Now, coming back to the advantages of chilling at camp, which I found myself doing more and more recently, and that's because, bringing up another point here. I find personally when I go on solo trips, I like to crush miles. I'm by myself. There's nobody holding back my performance other than me. It's me against myself, and I'm usually doing some sort of crazy drive that I couldn't convince my friends to do. When I go with friends, you might be with a group. You're only going to hike as fast as the lowest common denominator, even if you guys split up and then come back together, you know? So I find myself not planning as aggressive of trips with friends. And then at the same time, when you get to camp by yourself, I'm just beat and I go to sleep. I don't talk to myself all the time like I am right now with this camera. Whereas with a group of friends, it's pretty cool to get to camp and hang out. So maybe you do one vista instead of 3, and then you're at camp and you have time to build a fire and have that camaraderie and tell some stories and maybe have a beer or wine or whatever it is you packed in. If you're weight conscious, maybe Everclear, or maybe you just drink some tea, right? Whatever you're into. You have that time to hang out. So I see the advantage of that. That's kind of why I like both. So sorry, for me personally, no one answer. Sometimes I want high mileage, sometimes I want to chill. That being said, when I'm in that mileage mode, a quick defense to those who say that, yeah, you're doing 3 times the mileage, but you're not really paying attention to anything. You know, at this point, I've done enough trips of both styles to say that honestly, even when I'm blazing along at 3 to 4 mile per hour pace cruising, right? There's trips where I've done in the same area. Case in point is Red River Gorge. I went there and did a more fast-paced trip where I drove down, had to bang out some miles, and then drive back. And then I did another slower-paced trip. Same general area, but obviously didn't do as many miles with some friends, longer amount of time, more relaxed. I saw a lot more on that first trip. I just did, even though I might have kind of not stopped and sat there and had a snack and stared at it, you know, and just kind of cruised by a lot of it. I have a lot of memories of different arches and segments of trail and different foliage and stuff like that because I did basically cover a loop that encompassed the entire area. Whereas when I went with my friends, we saw a little snippet of that, but I also have different memories. So I'm not quite so on board that when we go ultralight with high mileage, we're not soaking anything in. It's just a different experience. It's a trade-off, right? So I'm curious, you out there, what do you think? Are you a mileage killer or a camp chiller? Are you in between? Do you think one or the other is ridiculous, or you see the merits in both? Tell me what you think in the comment section below. Till next time, I'm SinTech77. Have fun out there.